Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. When it comes to men opening up, it ain't as simple as you think. See, most men, we've been raised on this idea that we got to be strong, tough, never show no weakness. From the time we were little boys, we heard things like man up, don't cry, handle it yourself. So when we get grown, we carry that same mindset, and suddenly you expect us to just pour our hearts out like it's easy. It's not that simple. Let me break this thing down real clear, because if we don't understand the foundation of how men are built, we're going to keep missing the mark. When you look at why so many men have a hard time opening up, why it feels like pulling teeth just to get them to say what's on their heart, you got to go back to how we were raised. From the time a boy is born, people start shaping him with these rules that sound real simple, but cut real deep. You hear phrases like be strong, don't cry, man up. Now, those sound harmless to some people, but those little phrases become the blueprint for how a man learns to carry himself. It tells him right away that emotions equal weakness, that feelings are something to hide, and that if you show too much of what's really going on inside, the world gonna see you as soft. So what happens? That little boy grows up with all this pressure to prove himself, to stand tall, to swallow tears instead of letting them out. And by the time he becomes a man, he's mastered the art of covering up pain with silence. Now you wonder why he don't open up? He been practicing shutting down since he was 5 years old. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he was trained not to show it. Think about that for a second. If a person spends their whole life being told to lock up their emotions, it ain't going to be easy for them to just hand you the key when you ask for it. And ladies, here's what I need you to hear. When a man is closed off, it ain't always because he doesn't love you or doesn't want to share. Sometimes it's because he doesn't even know how. You ask him what's wrong, he says nothing. You see, he's stressed, he says, I'm fine. That's not because he's careless. It's because nothing and I'm fine are the answers he learned to survive with. Those are the shields he was given when the world told him not to show pain. That's the script he memorized. Now let me tell you the heavy part. Every man alive has feelings, has fears, has moments where he wanted to let it out. But imagine being told all your life that crying is weak, that talking about your struggles makes you less of a man. You know what that does? It teaches him that silence is strength. It teaches him that shutting up is surviving. But here's the truth. It's killing him on the inside. A lot of men walk around carrying heavy loads because they don't feel like they got permission to put it down. They don't even realize that opening up could actually free them. And that's where the problem shows up in relationships. Because a woman looks at her man and thinks, why won't he just talk to me? Why won't he just let me in? But what you're really up against ain't just him. It's his entire upbringing, his culture, the generations before him. He's not just protecting himself. He's following the code he was handed. That's why I tell people, when a man does start to open up, that's not a small thing. That's a breakthrough. That's him unlearning years of silence in order to show you a piece of who he really is. So if you sitting there wondering why your man is quiet, why he doesn't pour his heart out the way you want, understand first that he was never taught that it was safe. He was never taught that anybody would handle his emotions with care. That's why I say the first key to helping a man open up is knowing his history. You got to recognize that behind every quiet answer, every I'm fine, There's a little boy who was told not to cry, who was told to tough it out, and unless somebody shows him different, he'll keep living by that script. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why men struggle. Not because they don't feel, but because they were raised to believe that showing it makes them weak. And until that changes, until they learn that it's okay to be vulnerable, opening up is always going to be the hardest thing for them to do. One of the most important things people miss when they want a man to open up is the kind of environment they create for him. Men don't just share their deepest thoughts and feelings anywhere. They need to feel that the ground they're standing on is solid. A man has to know that the moment he starts talking, he isn't going to be laughed at, criticized, or later reminded of everything he said when the mood changes. The truth is, a safe space is not just physical, it's emotional. It's the atmosphere around a man that lets him know, here, I'm not going to be judged, I'm not going to be attacked, and I'm not going to regret speaking my heart. Without that space, most men will just stay silent, even if inside they're carrying storms. Think about it like this. Every man is walking around with an emotional bank. Every time life hits him with stress, disappointment, or fear, that bank fills up a little more. But unlike women who might have friends, sisters, or mothers they can pour their hearts out to, a lot of men feel like they don't have anybody. So that emotional bank just stays full. When he finally gets a chance to release some of it, he's not just going to give it to anybody. He's going to hand it to the one who makes him feel safe enough to do so. If he feels like his words might be turned into ammunition later, he's keeping that vault locked tight. What creates safety is not complicated, it's understanding, patience, and respect. When a man is finally brave enough to show a piece of himself, it matters how that moment is handled. If he's talking and somebody interrupts him, if his feelings get dismissed as small, or if he's told he shouldn't feel that way, he shuts down. That's all it takes. One wrong reaction, and he thinks, see, this is why I don't talk. On the other hand, if he sees you listening, not just with your ears, but with your attention, your presence, your body language, then he begins to believe that maybe this time it's different. Maybe this time he's safe. Men don't need perfection in that space. They need consistency. They need to know that if they talk about their fears, they won't be seen as weak. If they admit their mistakes, they won't be punished forever. And if they share their dreams, they won't be laughed at. When a man feels safe like that, he will say things you never imagined he had inside him. He'll open doors to emotions he didn't even realize he was holding back. A safe, non-judgmental space is not just about being quiet while he speaks, it's about what happens after. Does he feel respected when the conversation ends? Does he feel like his words are valued? Or does he walk away regretting every sentence he said? See, people underestimate the power of regret in communication. If a man shares something once and later feels like it's been thrown in his face, that was probably his last attempt. But if he shares something and feels lighter, feels understood, then he'll want to do it again. That's how trust grows. It's also important to remember that men don't open up on command. You can't force that door open. You have to give him the key by showing him day after day that you can handle the real version of him. Not just the strong version, not just the fun version, but the tired version, the scared version, the broken version. That's what safety really means. It's saying, I can handle all of you, not just the easy part. So many men walk around with words bottled up because they're just waiting for someone to give them that environment. And when they finally find it, it changes everything. They start to realize that opening up isn't as dangerous as they thought. They realize they can still be respected while being vulnerable. That's the kind of space that heals, that bonds, that creates intimacy at the deepest level. When it comes to getting a man to truly open up, listening is one of the most underrated skills there is. Most people think listening just means being quiet while the other person talks, but real listening goes way deeper than that. Real listening is when a man feels like every word he says is landing in a place where it matters. It's when he doesn't just hear silence after his words, but he feels understanding, patience, and acceptance coming from you. That's the kind of listening that makes him go further, makes him share more, makes him reach deeper inside himself than he ever planned to. The problem is, too many times when a man begins to talk, people jump in too quickly. They interrupt with advice, with corrections, or with their own stories. And what that does is it shuts him down. See, men don't talk for the sake of hearing themselves. They talk because they're finally letting out something they've been holding on to. And if the moment they try to release it, somebody cuts them off, it makes them feel like their words don't matter. That's why so many men retreat back into silence. They think, why bother saying anything at all if I'm not going to be heard? Listening without criticism is the next big part. Every man has thoughts he's not proud of, fears he doesn't want to admit, mistakes he wishes he could erase. When he chooses to speak those things out loud, it's not because he wants judgment, it's because he's searching for relief. If the response he gets is instant criticism, you shouldn't feel that way, that's wrong, that's stupid, he learns very quickly that opening up is dangerous. One sharp comment can slam the door shut for months. But if the response is patience, if it's a nod, if it's simply giving him room to finish, that man will feel something he's not used to feeling. He'll feel safe being imperfect. The art of listening is also about silence. Not the kind of silence that's cold or distant, but the kind that invites more words. Sometimes when you don't rush to fill the space, a man would dig deeper into what he's really feeling. That pause gives him time to sort his emotions, to find words he never thought he'd say. And when he sees that you're still there, not judging, not interrupting, but truly waiting, he begins to trust that his voice has value. Another thing about men is they test the waters before they dive in. A man might start by saying something small, almost like a throwaway line, just to see how it lands. If you listen with full attention to that small thing, if you don't cut him off or laugh at it, he thinks, all right, maybe I can share more. That's how it works. Each little piece he shares is like handing you a brick from a wall he's been hiding behind. The more bricks you accept without smashing, the more of that wall comes down. Listening also means holding space for things you don't fully agree with. You don't have to share his exact feelings to validate that those feelings are real for him. That validation is powerful because it tells him he doesn't have to be perfect to be heard. Imagine carrying something heavy all day and finally setting it down. That's what a man feels when he speaks and someone listens without correcting him. It's like letting his soul breathe for a moment, and here's the truth. A lot of men don't even know they need that kind of listening until they experience it. When they do, it changes the way they see communication. They start realizing that talking can actually heal, that words, when received without interruption, and without judgment can lift the weight off their shoulders. And once a man realizes that, he won't just share the surface stuff. He'll start sharing the deep parts, the vulnerable parts, the dreams, the fears. That's where true connection begins. Vulnerability is one of those things that men struggle with the most, but it's also the very thing that creates the deepest bonds. For a man, showing vulnerability often feels like stepping out into the open without armor. He's been trained to walk through life with his guard up, with strength on display, with toughness leading the way. So when the idea of being vulnerable comes up, it doesn't feel natural. It feels risky. But here's the truth. When a man finds the courage to be vulnerable, that's the moment real trust begins to grow, and that trust is the key that unlocks his willingness to open up. See, vulnerability isn't just about tears or weakness. Vulnerability is about honesty. It's saying, this is where I'm scared. This is where I feel small. This is where I don't have all the answers. And those moments are rare because most men believe they're supposed to have it all together. They think if they show any cracks, they'll lose respect. But in reality, vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. It's the strength to let someone see the side of you that you usually keep hidden. That kind of courage is what builds connection. Trust doesn't appear overnight. A man doesn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to trust completely. Trust is built moment by moment, conversation by conversation. And nothing builds it faster than vulnerability being handled with care. When a man reveals something personal and it's met with respect, encouragement, and understanding, his trust in that person grows. He thinks, maybe I can share more. Maybe I don't have to keep this all to myself. But if that same vulnerability is met with mockery, dismissal, or harsh judgment, the wall goes right back up, higher than before. That's how delicate it is. One safe experience makes him open wider. One unsafe experience makes him shut tighter. What people don't realize is that every time a man opens up about his fears, his mistakes, or his insecurities, he's taking a risk. He's risking being misunderstood, being seen as less of a man, being laughed at, or being rejected. That's why when his vulnerability is accepted with compassion, it feels like a breakthrough. It's like giving him proof that he can finally let his guard down without losing himself. That moment of acceptance tells him you can be fully you and still be loved. And once that message sinks in, trust takes root. Trust is the bridge between vulnerability and openness. Without trust, vulnerability feels dangerous. With trust, vulnerability feels safe. When a man knows he's in the presence of someone who values his truth, he doesn't just share bits and pieces anymore. He shares the whole story. That's when you see a man open up about things he's never told anybody, not because he was forced, but because the trust built through vulnerability made it possible. One of the most powerful things about vulnerability is that it works both ways. When someone shows a man their own vulnerable side, it gives him permission to show his. He realizes he's not the only one carrying struggles, fears, or doubts. Vulnerability becomes contagious in the best way. It creates a cycle where honesty feeds honesty, where trust feeds trust. And once that cycle starts, it becomes the foundation of a relationship that's built to last. It's also important to understand that vulnerability doesn't always show up in big dramatic moments. Sometimes it's in the little things. a man admitting he's tired.